Hey, good evening, and thank you for joining us for the SI Evening Edition. I'm Kevin Fry, Product Adoption Specialist at DTools, once again meeting you at the intersection of our software and your business. At DTools, we're constantly exploring ways to help you maximize your DTools SI investment, and tonight we will be covering a critical topic, labor best practices. But before we dive in, I'd like to remind you that these events are hosted by our customer success team, including your SI account managers and several of our professional services consultants. They will be in the chat helping to answer your questions during the event. We encourage you to engage with the team by typing questions into the chat or Q&A sections in Teams during the presentation. Tonight is our first episode in a new series called Back to Basics. We want to make sure that you, our listener, have a solid understanding of the fundamentals of DTools SI. We often learn one way to solve a problem in SI and never expand upon that approach. And while the software is flexible and more than one route might exist to get to a solution, we believe there are best practices in many areas of SI. We aim to tell that story one topic at a time and set you up for continued success with SI. So please engage with us and help us determine where we go from here. We'd like to hear your opinions on topics that are important to you. And we're going to start off the series tonight with a discussion of labor best practices. And for Evening Edition Volume 6, we'll take a deep dive into project reporting options and best practices. So let's get started. When we talk about labor in SI, what we're really aiming for is a process that's structured, integrated, accurate, flexible, efficient, and ultimately actionable. Let me walk you through what that looks like. First, labor needs to be structured. That's why we use labor types. Each type represents a category of work, whether it's installation, programming, commissioning, or some other type, and each can carry its own rate so that the budgeting is consistent. Second, labor works best when it's integrated directly with products. Instead of treating labor as an afterthought, SI lets us assign labor types to items in the bill of materials. That way, as you build a quote, the labor budget builds right alongside it. Third, accuracy is everything. So SI's labor type structure accounts not just for production time, the actual work, but also non-production time, for example, shop time or drive time. And don't forget about project management and design. All of that gets rolled into hours and dollars automatically. Fourth, we know every project is different. That's where labor difficulty factors come in. You can scale up or down with a single setting instead of manually editing dozens of line items. And fifth, efficiency matters. When you combine labor types with product assignments, your labor budget essentially writes itself as you quote. That saves time and ensures you don't miss anything. And finally, labor data in SI isn't just for quoting, it's actionable. Because labor is tied to products and types, it feeds into scheduling and project planning automatically. That makes it easier to execute once the contract is signed. So that's the big picture of labor best practices. Everything we'll cover tonight builds on these principles. So we'll start talking about this idea that items can have more than one labor type. This is an update that came about in SIV 20, so still relatively new, but something that we feel strongly about is a great opportunity to streamline your catalog and really to streamline the way that you build your projects and your quotes, and then ultimately driving to easier scheduling across your project. So again, some examples of multiple labor types in a product might be pre-config or pre-configuration, this idea that maybe I need to pull a device out of the box in the shop, update the firmware, assign an IP address, things like that before it ever leaves the warehouse. And then later, we actually get on site and perform installation. There could also be programming associated with this product that either happens maybe on site or in a separate task with a separate resource at a different time. And then finally, when we come together to bring this, bring the system up and make sure it's functional, we might actually perform a separate commissioning task. All of these can be defined and assigned item by item to drive those budgets for our projects, right? And a really cool thing, we won't dig into the details tonight, but for each of these labor types, we can actually create a separate task with different resources to perform the work and put that on a different location, different date on our calendar. So all of these types come together to, again, streamline quoting, streamline our ability to execute these projects. So let's dig in a little bit to labor type structure, and then I'll show you how it works. So each labor type really has 4 different components. I call the primary one production time, right? The direct work. If it's installation, production time is the time it takes to do the work itself. And in the labor type, when I show you, you'll see that that's called base labor. Second, we have this idea of non-production time, things like drive time, shop time, administration, anything that's not directly associated with the work, but is part of my schedule, right? If I schedule 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, when I add production time and non-production time, or this idea of base labor and miscellaneous labor, I add those together, that becomes my schedule or the time that I have available to schedule my technicians and other resources. And then there are 2 more subtypes inside of a labor type. One is project management and the other is design. And each of these can have their own rates and factors that play into the calculations that become the total labor for a labor type. So let's get familiar with labor types. Let me provide a quick demonstration. So I have a sample project here. We'll just come straight up to settings and go to labor types. Let's maybe look at something like finish. So under the finish labor type, you can see the 4 subtypes I was talking about. So again, that idea of production time or the time it takes to do the work, that's going to be our first subtype, which we call base labor here. And notice we have a cost and a price for this that we can set. And then we have a difficulty factor. We'll come back and explore difficulty further. But the idea here is that for every hour product in my bill of materials that is assigned to the finished labor type, I get 1 hour of base labor with these settings. Then we have the miscellaneous, and miscellaneous can have a unique rate. It can have the same rate. I typically have the same rate. I'm just going to go ahead and update that. I wanted you to see that if I change the cost and the price, the system automatically calculates my margin, or I can drive margin to get a price calculated, but I do have to have a cost in place first. So if I was to update these margins, my price will automatically update. So miscellaneous labor is currently set at 33%, this factor of 33%. That effectively says that for every hour of base labor, I will get 0.33 hours or approximately 20 minutes of miscellaneous labor. And if I think of that miscellaneous labor as kind of that non-production time, shop time, drive time, right? The time that I know I spend every day that is not actually the action of, say, installing equipment or pulling cable or programming or whatever it is that my daily tasks include, this miscellaneous labor is going to be that other time that we know that we spend, right? None of us are 100% efficient. And so this idea of miscellaneous labor helps us understand the difference each day between our actual production time and all the other time that we spend. And what I really like about this idea is that base labor and miscellaneous labor get added together, and that total amount of time becomes our schedule. So by utilizing the concept of miscellaneous labor as this idea of non-production time, we get a full picture of what our schedule is going to look like, and we don't have to work very hard to do it. There are some simple calculations. I ask customers a lot, what does your labor efficiency look like, right? How many hours a day of actual efficient production work do you expect from, you're a typical technician? And sometimes I hear, 7 hours or 6 hours, or depending on the location, right? If it's a customer working in Manhattan, sometimes they're saying 4 hours, right? There's lots of traffic, there's lots of driving, difficulty parking. So all of these factors that play into how we schedule work and the efficiency that we can deliver each day. So this miscellaneous labor helps us understand that and helps us account for that and actually helps us budget and schedule accordingly in our projects. So let's take a look at how I might approach that. So there's a simple calculation. If you told me that you schedule 8 hours a day and that it's 7 hours of efficiency, then I'm going to create a little, there's just a simple calculation, which is just going to be 1 hour of non-production time divided by 7 hours, right? If I add those two numbers together, that gives me my 8 hours, and 1 divided by 7 it's about 14%. So I would put that number here in place of the 33. If that number changed, say it's 2 hours of non-production time, right? I'm getting 6 hours of production a day, then it's 2 divided by 6. Again, as long as those two numbers add up to my schedule time, then this ratio works really well. So notice that the 2 divided by 6 is the 0.33. That's where this number came from. It suggests that I can get 6 hours of work, production time done in a day, and about 2 hours of non-production time. And so this setting will actually automatically generate an 8-hour budget every day, where 6 hours is production and 2 hours is this miscellaneous labor. And then I might do a similar calculation to think about things like management and design. So these are going to be, an interesting concept. If I was to say that maybe I have, let's say I have 10 technicians in the field and I have 1 project manager, well, that is a ratio of 1 to 10, right? Or 10%. And that's where I come up with a number like that. So, if I have 10 techs in the field and I am trying to schedule 40 hours a week for them, that is 400 hours. And at the same time, I want to sell and be able to schedule 40 hours of project management. That 10% factor gives that to me. If those numbers changed, if I had 10 techs and 2 project managers, it would actually double. That factor would double. If I had 15 techs and 2 project managers, it would be 2 divided by 15. Whatever that number is the number I'm going to put here. Design is no different. In this simple calculation, this is this idea of kind of a 1 to 10 factor between design resources and field resources. I want you to note that, again, the base labor represents 1 hour. And then we have 0.33 hours of miscellaneous, and then 0.1 hours each of management design, for this total of 1.53 hours. Let me actually show you exactly how that works. Right, if I zero these out, we'll just back up a little bit, kind of to a more baseline circumstance where now we just have the base labor and the default at 100%. So we get 1 hour. That says that if I have an item with finish labor type assigned to it and an hour assigned to it, I get 1 hour. If I add my 0.33 or my 33% back in, I'm now going to get, for that 1 hour, I actually get 1.33. And the idea is that if I assigned an hour of finished labor to a product and said it takes 1 hour to do this work, I know that I'm not 100% efficient. There's really this other 20% factor, 20-minute factor in that hour of non-production time, which includes drive time, shop time, etc. Right? Same for these, right? If I'm selling that 10% for management and for design, is going to factor those in for me automatically. So let's save that and let's kind of take a look at how that might work in an item real quick. So maybe if I go to this display allowance, we go to the price section here, and you can see there's finished labor assigned to it, and it's currently set at 2 hours. Um, and if we look over as we kind of follow this data across, notice the factor is 153%. That is that 1.53 hours, right? It's the combination of everything we just saw in the labor type. So what we actually come out with is, instead of it being 2 hours, we actually get about 3 hours plus a little extra here. And if I scroll down to my view section, we can see a little bit more detail about that labor here. If I expand this, we can see the 2 hours. We can actually click this button right here to view the labor type details, and it actually shows us that breakdown, how that calculation gets performed to come up with our totals. Right, so each subtype has the base units of time associated with it, multiplied by its factor, multiplied by its rate to come up with the time and the dollars, and then we add all of that up at the bottom, so that for 2 hours of this labor type, 2 hours of base labor, we actually sell 3 hours and 3 minutes, and we sell that for $371. Okay, give me just a moment. So next we're going to talk about how the approach that I'm recommending is going to help us build our labor budgets automatically. So I'm going to switch over to my SI catalog here in a moment, and I'll walk you through some of this, and then I'll demonstrate how that works in a project. But just a couple of key points to think about, right? That with this approach, when we add items to the BOM, we get this instant labor budget, right? Each item we add is generating labor along the way. That quote will include both hours and the costs or prices related to that time. And it helps us, it really provides this clear kind of baseline for project planning to really understand how these budgets can be used to execute on our project. So let's take a look at some of this in action. I'd like to start again by looking at some of these items in the catalog, thinking about how we can actually assign the various labor types. So here's an example, right? We have a group of wireless access points. So let's assume that in our approach, we're going to use the same types of labor and quantities of labor for each of these. So I'll show you not only how we can apply this, but how we can do this across multiple items. So I'm going to switch over to my price layout so we'll get a little bit more exposure here to some of the labor data, including our labor types and hours. Actually, before I do that, I want to show you how you can change your labor settings. This is also something that was introduced in version 20, and you may not be familiar with it, but this idea of hours, minutes, and seconds. I'm going to go down here to the control panel, and under company information, I'm going to go to preferences, and right here, labor hours display in hours, minutes, and seconds. I'm going to go ahead and set that to no. That is going to be a global setting within this environment. I'll go ahead and save that, and then I'll have to restart, but I think that's fine. It's a little easier to look at the data this way. So now our labor is going to change to decimal time. We'll go ahead and log back in real quick, and we'll continue on. Yeah, I prefer the decimal time. It was really the default and only option in SI for many years. Some of us prefer to have the hours, minutes, and seconds, but I find that just an easy to read and easy to interact with in the UI, it's definitely easier for me to work in decimal time. So we'll go back to the catalog here. Go back and grab. So let's just start with something simple, right? We have, for instance, a wireless access point. So let's go ahead and open this item and let's consider how to approach the labor here. So I'm going to go to the price section again, and we're going to notice that down here under labor types, it looks like something happened. Maybe we made some changes and something got somewhat deleted, but we have programming associated with it. But I really do want to also include finish. So I have this idea finish labor type. We have a half an hour of that. We have programming, about 20 minutes of that. Maybe it's actually 0.5. Let's keep it simple. Um, and I would like to also add, sometimes when I show something like this, that the installation or the finished component of this is a half an hour. Someone will make a comment like, well, what about the cable, or what about the back box? And yes, what about them? They all should have their own labor. In my opinion, in my kind of best practice approach here, we assign labor to every item in the catalog. And so as we, add these products together or accessorize products, right? We can have accessories here. I'm not sure what this is. Yeah, so this is a bracket, right? We have some kind of a bracket in place here. And if I was to open this bracket, we'll see that it, in fact, has its own labor, right? That's the idea. And if it doesn't, we're going to make sure that it does. So it's probably not the correct type. I'm assuming this is a rough in bracket. So rough in it, 0.12 hours. Let's make that say 0.25. So we'll give 15 minutes for that. Or we wanted to give 6 minutes, I think, 0.1, something like that, to mount the bracket, right? So that mount has its own time associated with it as an accessory. I could also accessorize this with a cable if that's how I wanted to approach that, right? And that cable should also have its own labor. So again, my theory really says that every device has labor. Some devices have more than one type of labor, and the combination of all those labor types and hours is how my budget gets developed in general. Instead of trying to say, well, when I install a wireless access point, I need about a half an hour to install the access point, and an hour to pull cable and 15 minutes to set the back box, right? We don't, I really don't approve of the concept of combining that under one item. Again, let's just break that up and let's divide it across the components so that we don't have to think so hard about this, right? We understand how much time each component takes, and we add them together and we get a good budget to start with. Okay, so that was kind of just a quick demo that I can assign multiple types and time to a device. But what if all of these access points, and it looks like I have a few more, what if they all need the same amount of time? And even though these outdoor ones, let's just include these as well. So this whole group, I want to update them all so that they have a consistent amount of labor. So I'm going to right click here, and we have update labor types. We can also get to that from the tools menu at the top of the screen, but I'll do the update for labor types on these selected items. So we have some cool options here just to help you bridge this gap, right? If you're not taking this approach today, maybe your items have a single labor type and you want to expand upon that. There's a couple of ways you can go about it. So using this option, if I want to leave the labor that I already have alone, then I can use the append option, right? So it's going to leave any labor type and hours that I already have in place. It'll leave those alone. And if I want to just start fresh and overwrite everything, I'll simply choose the overwrite option. There's a couple others here. I encourage you to explore that based on your needs, but I'm going to do the overwrite here. So we'll keep it simple. Let's say that we're going to add some finish time, and maybe, there's 0.5 hours there. Maybe we're going to add programming, also 0.5 hours. What about something I like to call I think earlier I talked about pre-config, but in this system, I have it called in-house setup. So again, this idea that before we take devices out into the field, sometimes we update firmware, do some basic setup, including maybe assigning an IP address. But then, the programming and the actual detailed setup of the device and the network might happen on site as a separate task. So this in-house setup gets us prepared to get out into the field and do the install. Then we handle that install with the finished labor type, and then we program it, and off we go. So let's say that maybe it's 15 minutes of in-house setup. So we've set 3 labor types with budgets. We can see all this math being done here for us, and I'm simply going to click save. It's going to apply that to all these devices. So pretty straightforward. And if you're trying to think about how to approach this, I think it's smart to even start with just a simple spreadsheet. Identify product categories, and then with those categories, identify the different types of labor and hours associated with them. And if you can develop at least a basic spreadsheet to get you started, you'll have a nice reference point to start to apply these techniques here in your catalog. So let's maybe go back to a project and look at how we can start to add some of these devices. I'm going to keep it really simple so that we don't have a lot of complexity here. I want to make it easy for us to understand what we're building. So I'll open this project. Yeah, so we have a small project, nothing too exciting, but maybe let's start with some of those devices that I just updated. Let's consider what that looks like. I want to note first, there's a few issues with some of these items. I'm not too worried about it. They seem to have labor in place, so I'm not too worried. But we're going to go here. We'll go grab a couple of these additional items. So let's say that maybe we're using this A610, and I need to put it in a handful of locations. So I'm going to assign a few of these locations. Maybe something like that. Right. So if I grab from the Product Explorer and just drag that out, we're going to get these added. Prompting us about that mount, we'll go ahead and take the mount. It's going to come with its own labor. And then let's take a look here. Yeah, so there's no price associated with these items, which I'm okay with for this demonstration. But let's pop this open. Let's take a look at one of these 610s and recognize that that labor that we set up came through. Now, some of you might be wondering, did I get the same values? Like, what about the rates? So the nice thing about labor types or rates is that they're actually set up on a per project basis. So I'm going to recommend that you set up your labor types globally, and then and that'll be back in your control panel, right? So get all the different labor types you need defined, set the rates, as your standard rates. And then if you need to make adjustments on a per project basis, you're going to come to the types within a project and have the ability to modify those. Okay. So if I was to go over to this quick summary view and maybe do a labor type summary, you'll see things like we have that finished labor. You can see that some of that finished labor is assigned to that A610 that I just added in. If I click here, I can see each one, and then I can open them up and kind of see those details. Now, there is an option, right? I could come here and say that, in this case, there's some complexity. I could just increase the hours. And it's not a bad option, but it's not usually where I start. But let me just show you what that looks like. And there's a setting I have turned on, I think, that's going to show that if I change it here, it's going to actually update the rest. So let's hope that that's set. If I save it, I get this prompt, right? So update similar products. So even though I don't generally approach this by editing the hours in an item, I still have that as an option. And then if I turn this setting on, it asks me to update the other 4 items to match. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK and let it do that. Let me show you where to find that. That's going to be under I believe it's under our prompt settings, under project editor. Yeah, right here, prompt to update similar items when item editor closed. That's a key setting I like to turn on. So that'll make some of these labor adjustments very easy. So then let's go back here and just kind of walk through this idea of labor difficulty. And I'd like to get this wrapped up as quick as I can so that we'll have some time for questions. So let's talk about this idea of applying labor difficulty, right? Like, why would we use it? Um, well, really, the whole idea is to adjust our budgets as quickly as possible, right? We just talked about how we can assign these various labor types with hours to products. We can add those to our projects and it starts to develop our budget automatically. But then we look at various factors in any given project, right? There could be issues like the construction type, the materials. Is it a concrete building? Is it wood framed? Are the ceilings 10 feet? Are the ceilings 14 feet? Right? There might be various reasons that we can identify while we're quoting the job to help us think about difficulty. And one of the simple approaches, and I see this a lot with companies that use that use an approach like labor line items. They say that, well, I use labor line items because I can just open the line item and just adjust the time and keep moving. Well, labor difficulty kind of allows us to do the same thing. So one of the ways I look at that is I might come here and run, say, a project summary report, and it's going to show me really quickly some labor budgets. And I can look at those budgets. Sorry, we'll let this open. We'll look at those budgets, and sometimes we might just immediately say, well, if I look at, for instance, that finish at 28 hours, maybe I immediately recognize it's too low and I want a different number, right? Let's say I'm going to send 2 technicians out for 28 hours. That's really 14 hours per tech. So that's not quite 2 days. So even just from a very practical standpoint, I might simply want to adjust this budget to 32 hours so that I actually get 16 hours for 2 days, right, for 2 technicians. Now, as I mentioned before, when we see these subtotals here, these are actually including both base and miscellaneous labor. So I like to do this calculation, keep it really simple, and I'm just simply going to type in what I want, right, which is 32 hours divided by what the system generated, which is 28. And I'm going to get a number. So it's about 1.14. Really simple. I'm gonna make my labor difficulty for finish about 114% in this project. So settings, labor types, just go to finish, and I'll make it 114.28. That was the actual number. And notice that, so instead of getting 1 hour of base labor, my base labor goes up by that 14%. So I get an additional 0.14 hours. Now, in this case, my miscellaneous is not turned on. I'll do that in just a second. And we'll go back and run that report again, and we'll see that we should be very close to 32 hours. Yeah, there we go. I'll take 31.99, right? This method is not often going to give us nice round numbers, and I can live with that. If you really require nice round numbers, you might want to take a different approach, but I believe that the advantages we get in speed and the advantages we get with accuracy and the ability to streamline scheduling and project planning outweighs any issues related to slight rounding in hours. Let's do this. Let's do a couple of quick things here. Let's go ahead and go to the finish, and let's say that really we want to add, I don't know, let's say we're going to add 25% in miscellaneous, and then that means that we're getting about 0.25 hours for each hour of base labor, right? So let's look at that data again. I'm going to show you a different way to get to it. We'll go to the labor type summary. We'll look at finish. So now we're at 45.59 hours. I want to scroll across here to make sure you understand some of the where that data came from. So what that is that's base labor plus miscellaneous labor plus management labor and design. So in that type, we have the 10% design and management. So really that is what that total number is. So if we were going to try to adjust our schedule for this labor type, I really need to have base and miscellaneous. And I find that usually the easiest way to get that is just to run that project summary report. It just takes a few seconds usually. So again, look at that. Our finish is now at 39.99. So basically 40 hours. It's 2.5 days on site for two technicians. Maybe that's a great number. I think I'll stick with that. But if we wanted to adjust it further, right, we can continue to manipulate our labor difficulty or adjust our miscellaneous to get the numbers we want. So this best practice method, let's just kind of recap a little bit, right? With our labor types that are assigned to products, that is really going to be one of our kind of first best practice here. We want to make sure that we assign labor types and hours to our devices to help speed our bill of materials creation and our labor budget that basically gets built automatically. And we get nearly identical results versus using labor line items. That last demonstration I showed where I simply run a report, I get the base budget, I compare that to what I want it to be and generate a difficulty factor to hit the number I want. That really is the same thing that I see companies do all the time. It's really what do I want versus what the system generates. I can quickly adjust to hit those numbers. And there are some clear advantages. It's fast, it's simple, it's accurate, and it really, again, is going to lead to a happier operations team because it's going to streamline our ability to schedule and manage our projects. And here's a couple of key takeaways, right? Labor types equal accurate, consistent budgeting. Assigning to products equals simplified quoting. Labor difficulty equals easy adjustments. And it supports better scheduling. So that is my presentation for today. We're going to get started with our Q&A here in just a moment. So if you'd like to talk with us and ask a question, please use the raise hand option in your Teams window. And also write a short description, possibly in the chat, of the topic you'd like to address, and we'll do what we can to keep the questions organized and avoid too much jumping around. You're also welcome to type questions directly into the chat or the Q&A sections in Teams, and we can answer those questions directly. When you do get called upon, please remember you're going to have to unmute your microphone. Again, you will need to unmute your microphone. We'll try to remind you. So hopefully Trillia is with us. I'd like to introduce her, one of your SI account managers. I believe she's going to be moderating our Q&A session tonight. Trillia?
Hi, Kevin. Yes, thank you. I'm here. Good evening, everyone. So yes, feel free, of course, to start raising your hand. I will go ahead and call on you one by one in the order that you raised your hand. But before we do that, I think we may have some questions in the chat. So I just want to make sure that we address those before moving forward, if there are any.
So the question in the Q&A, Eduardo took care of already. So you don't have to check that part.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
The chat had more in it.
Okay.
If anybody wants to ask a question directly, go ahead and hit that hand raise feature and we'll get you in the queue. It looks like the team is helping quite a bit. If somebody can point me to any of the questions that look like we should address.
Yes.
Okay, so Brad says this was not answered. How accurate are the catalog labor times? Who specifies them, the manufacturer or D-Tools? It's a great question, Brad. We've been doing this since 1998. And over, a few decades, we have developed some standards. We always like to say that everything in our catalog and that's coming from our library that you can add to your catalog is a good start. We're not going to, we believe that while we think this data is a good place to start and to consider using it as a baseline, I'm always going to recommend that you need to be learning from the experience of your teams and past projects and potentially use feedback that you get from the field to update your catalog accordingly. I hope that helps. No data set's going to be perfect and every team is going to be different, so it's kind of a hard question to answer super clearly, but we like to use it as a good place to start.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. Right. Doesn't look like we have any questions yet. Again, feel free to raise your hand and we'll be sure to unmute your mic for you.
We do have a question about sending labor over. I'm working on that one if you want to take the hand raise first.
Yeah. All right.
And real quick, I'm just going to provide, sorry, I'm going to just provide. So Brad followed up. It looks like, are they consistent because DT creates them or the manufacturer? We create them. So generally we're going to see consistency across that. But again, we manage over 1 million products in our library, Brad. So I'm going to always encourage you to do your due diligence, audit your catalog, and, again, and without getting too off topic here, it also kind of goes back to, well, how big is my catalog? It's going to be a lot harder to audit a catalog with 5,000 or 10,000 products than it is to audit a catalog with 500 products. So again, maybe we'll do a catalog best practices as a future topic, really to think about how do we really own this data, manage this data, and use it for our success. We see that is really the hardest thing for most companies to really wrangle, is their catalog, to really stay on top of it and keep it at a size and with accurate, at a size that's easy to manage and, consistently accurate data. Sorry, go ahead. Who has the next question?
Yes, it's Jose. I'm going to go ahead and unmute his mic now.
And Jose, you're going to have to, oh, there you go.
Yep.
Are you there, Jose?
I have a question in regards to Visio and the drawings. Very much like the background that you have right now. The different devices show kind of a little cloud or a cone for coverage. Mm-hmm. I've seen some of those are in the floor plan icon set for DTools. But my question is, how can we'd like to have that also for, let's say, speakers in Visio, where it shows, that type of arrangement.
Yeah, so let's see here. Let's see what we have. If I can pull up a project that has some drawings in it, maybe this one will be a good option. So I think I've looked at this issue. I've talked to some customers about this over the years. I'm not sure that we have a shape that's quite ideal for that. I think it's a good question. I think it's probably something we should consider. I think when I've looked at it before, we've looked at options like using the dispersion property of a speaker to potentially, to actually help determine
represent the area
the radius, exactly, the radius or the area that we might show. Sorry, I was on another screen. My computer is acting up here, trying to open Visio, but it's moving a little bit slowly. Give me just a moment. Thanks, Zach.
Yeah, no problem.
It's opening. Give it just a second. It was stuck with a prompt up.
While Kevin's opening up Visio, there is a Visio course or a Visio evening edition something you guys might be interested? Maybe drop it in the chat if so. Consider as a topic.
So I'll pull over a drawing sample. Yeah, thanks for that. And I think that, yeah, this is exactly the kind of feedback we want to get. What should we talk about here? And if the software is falling short somewhere, like, let's talk about it. Let's identify areas we can improve. We're constantly looking at, how to make the software the best it can be. So your feedback really is important to that. What I was mentioning here, let me open one of these speakers. I was mentioning that there is a dispersion field. So under specifications, we have dispersion, and I'm not sure why. Oh, sorry. I guess this is an approved project. For some reason, it looks like dispersion is not editable, which I did not expect. That might be a limitation of the approved project. But I think really let's just get to the fundamentals of what you were asking about, Jose. So let me bring up Visio and let's see if we can just quickly demonstrate the ability to show everybody how we can control one of these shapes. So for instance, I have this camera shape here. This one does include coverage. Notice this is shape data. If you're not familiar with shape data, let me show you how to activate this. It's really important in Visio. So if I select a shape and right click, there's a data option and shape data. I typically leave the shape data window open for the most part when I'm working in Visio because there are many configuration options around our shapes that are available here, and it gives us easy access. So when there's no shape selected, there's no shape data, and any shapes that have shape data, they will populate here when we select the shape. So for instance, I can say coverage style is maybe it's line and fill, and I can rotate this around and, show some sort of coverage, and then I can determine the angle, right? So maybe that sweep angle is a little narrower, maybe it's 90 degrees, not sure, right? It's flexible, and then I can also adjust the color here, do some different choices. And here's a really nice, very powerful Visio tip. So when I modify a shape like this and I manipulate the shape data, if I want this to become a default behavior, whenever I utilize a product like this or this particular shape, I can just right click on the shape after I've done it, and we'll go to D-Tools, Shape, and we'll choose Assign Product and Category. And we get some options here. I want first to just point out you should tread lightly here, be careful, and try to understand the results before you do this. But the idea says that when we're on the plan view type with this specific shape, this dome coverage, dome camera with coverage, I can choose to not only assign this particular shape, but capture the shape data assignments that we've made here, as well as decide in what circumstances should this apply. Should this be for products in the camera subcategory, or in the case of where I've adjusted, say, the angle for this sweep coverage, maybe I know some details about this particular camera and its lens options, and I want to actually apply it to this specific product. So if I was to choose that and select this, every time I drop this particular product on a plan view page, this would be the result I would get. So it's a very powerful feature to help us make choices, configure the behaviors in Visio, get the results we want, and then make them repeatable. Let's see another related feature. I selected
Hey, Kevin.
Yes.
Kevin, real quick. I think this is all really good, but I think we have there may be a couple hand raised. I want to make sure that we get all the questions answered if possible.
Absolutely.
Real quick.
Yeah, go right
What
ahead.
I wanted to see it on was a speaker.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for here. I don't know that there is one. We're going to find out real quick. I don't think the speaker has the coverage built in, but I think that's something that we can take into consideration and see if there's an updated shape that we can get for you. What's the next question we have?
We'll follow up with that, Jose. We'll take that as a follow-up and see if we get you an updated shape or instructions on how to modify.
Thanks, Jose. Appreciate the question.
I don't see any additional hands raised. Let me see if there are any questions in the chat that haven't been answered. Oh, wait.
Hey, Kevin, do you mind going over Elias in the catalog? Seems like we have a few questions related to that, and I'm typing in answers here, but I feel like if you go over that functionality, will be helpful.
Yeah, the manufacturer aliases. Sure.
Yes, please.
So did I read, Jeff, that in Hotfix 6 we're modifying that based on that discussion we had recently? Is that true?
Yep, that's correct.
That is correct.
Okay, so let me go to the catalog really quickly. I'll make this very brief because we're coming up against our end time in about 5 minutes. But let me just set the stage for the basic concept. So sometimes, we might bring in some products into our catalog where, notice here, and this is, part of this is just kind of bad catalog management. But notice I have a manufacturer called Arachnus, and I have some called Arachnus Networks. So we have the ability to, help the catalog system and really the library, our ability to lean into our library data to actually work it out regardless of which one of these I use. I don't really recommend that this is the way we approach it, but what an alias does, it says that I can name the manufacturer any name I want, and then I can provide an alias that gives us the ability to look that up and match it in our library. So for instance, if we go to settings, we go to manufacturers, you'll notice that maybe, so this is a good example. Like Axis is a manufacturer in my catalog, and then Axis Communications is an alias. And the reason that I have that is that if we go to the library and we say we want to add from the library, we're going to see that it is in fact Axis Communications. So by simplifying the name in the catalog to Axis and then providing the alias for Axis Communications, any item that we enter under that Axis manufacturer will still cross-reference to Axis Communications here in the library. And then let me briefly mention there is some updates coming about that. Since I'm not 100% up to speed on those, I'm going to encourage each of you to take a look. Hotfix number 6 is going to come out, I believe, tomorrow. You should start to see some communication about that. I would encourage you to go check out our documentation site and look at the details of the update, or when you do install the update, I'd encourage you to read those details about some enhanced behaviors around manufacturer aliases. Any other questions? Any final question I can maybe take a look at here?
There's a question on where those release notes are.
Yeah, let's see. Thanks, Zach, for putting that in the chat. And then I'm going to go ahead and share that here as well. So anywhere that you're in SI, so real quick, notice this button that says Learn More. If I click Learn More, it will, in fact, open our doc site, but it opened to the catalog. It did that because I was in the catalog when I clicked it, so it takes me directly to help information about the catalog. The website is just docs.d-tools.com. If I click this SI icon, it takes me to the main page. And then is that going to be under deploying SI? Actually, let me go back to this one. That takes us directly there. Can anybody point me to the notes?
I usually
here.
search in the search box. I'll usually search release notes, and it should pop up that way. I'm not sure how to get there directly.
Thanks, Julia.
Yes,
Probably
no
helps.
problem.
Yeah, so right here, SIV 23 release notes. And as we scroll down, we can see the top one, the core updates. And I think, yeah, here we go. Hotfix 1, Hotfix 2. So as we've made updates, we're going to continue to enhance those. And so I'm assuming tomorrow those will go live with Hotfix 5. And notice here that, we've gone into a mode where we like to make small enhancements and feature additions, as well as, fix bugs and things that we find along the way. So definitely take a look at that. These aren't just patches of problems, but we're actually trying to enhance the software in useful ways along the way. I think that brings us to the top of the hour.
Yes, there is a mobile app coming. It will be part of our next release, which is a full release, which will be in Q1 of 2026. So the app will be available. We do have a functioning app now for testing, but it will be part of our next update, our next big update, major update. Sorry, Kevin, just saw that come in and wanted to quickly answer it.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Zach. And since you brought it up, I'm going to share
You're
just a
going to
little
show
teaser.
it. Yeah, there you go.
This is a phone. This is a Windows Phone Link app that brings up. I have the Android version of Mobile Install running on my mobile device, and here you're seeing. This is a slightly older build. I haven't had a chance to update in the last few builds, but it is mostly functional here. Very similar to the experience you would see in Mobile Install today, but this is it functioning on an Android app. So still some work to be done there, but very exciting progress, and we look forward to releasing that as soon as it's ready. But hopefully that shows you that we are serious. We really do have it, and it is really coming. So it's very exciting to see.
There was one more question slide in about forcing the application to prompt users to check in projects when they close them.
Is the question, how do we force that?
I think it's
Yeah.
Is there a global way to do it instead of just on an individual basis?
Well, let's go to the control panel real quick. We are over time, but I'll answer this one really quickly. Let's see if we can get to it from our company information. I think it's going to be under prompt settings. So under company information, is it preferences? No, it's going to be, sorry, it is in fact back under project prompt settings. So let's go into the project section. We have project settings, and then we have project prompt settings. Let's go to project prompt settings, and there's check-in project when project editor closed. So when I close a project, should I get a prompt to ask me to check it in? Should it automatically get checked in, or should it never bother me? And also to prompt to check in all projects when SI closed. And I'm not sure, can anyone confirm that these are global settings or user specific? I do believe that if you set these globally, every user will inherit them, but I do believe users may be able to change them after the fact. Is that correct?
Those are user specific. Machine specific.
User specific.
User specific.
Yeah, right. I do believe it would probably be smart for us to have some options to drive that at a more of like a user group level or some kind of a global setting. But
yeah, there's a setting, there's a feature request in there.
Yeah, for sure. So I know we're out of time. I don't want to keep any of you. It is late, and I would just like to say thank you for attending. Thank you for helping to make make this event a success. And please be on the lookout for a follow-up email with content links. So we'll have a video here and some updated information about our upcoming events. And please continue to let us know how we can support your business. We hope to see you at the next SI Evening Edition. Good night.